In video 2 from chapter 9, we will talk about language and the brain. So there are a couple of language specific areas in the brain that we need to discuss. The first one is called Broca's area. It's involved in speech production, located near the motor center, which produces movement of the lips and tongue. That makes sense. So the area involved in production is right near the area that controls your speaking apparatus. Damages in this area produces problems in producing speech and a tendency to use only essential words. So, as an example, there was a man that had a damage in Broca's area, which is, by the way, it's known as an aphasia. If you have a speech, if you have speech damage to the brain, an aphasia, APHASIA, aphasia. So a man that had Broca's aphasia, meaning that there was damage in Broca's area, he was asked about his weekend plans, and he said Boston, college, football, Saturday, meaning that he was going to go watch some college football, some Boston college football on Saturday. So it was a sentence with all the non-essential words eliminated, and I actually saw a recording of this person, and these words were very much spaced apart. So it was like Boston, then there was a gap, and then college, football, Saturday. So, and this is very typical of Broca's area damage, Broca's aphasia. So there's problems in speech production, but notice that the person did not say anything that didn't make sense. They lacked normal syntax and grammar, but their speech was intelligible. He wanted to say that he's going to watch Boston College football on Saturday, and he said Boston College football Saturday. So they typically make sense, but it's hesitant, slow speech, missing minor words. This is a picture of the brain. You can see Broca's area is colored green here, number 4. I don't like that they say muscles of speech associated with Broca's area. Just write down speech production. And you can see it's right next to the motor function area, the motor cortex, which is number 3. And so the area that controls your mouth and speaking is right next to Broca's area. Now, it has to do with muscles of speech, but the person that said Boston College football Saturday, it's not like he had trouble producing the word, like actually producing the words he wanted to say. It was trouble in organizing the words and picking out the right words to say. So it's not quite the muscles. That's not the only problem. Okay. A second aphasia and a second area that has to do with language is called Wernicke's area. You can see it number 8 there. And it's pronounced Wernicke, even though it starts with W. This has to do with comprehension of speech. So Broca's is about production, producing speech. Wernicke's is about understanding and comprehending speech, either written or spoken. You can see that Wernicke's area, number 8, is all around the auditory area. So Broca's area, which had to do with production, was right next to the part of your brain that produces speech, your lips and your tongue, and in the motor cortex. Wernicke's area surrounds the part that has to do with hearing, your auditory cortex, in number 5 there. And so this has to do with understanding language, but it also produces problems if there's problems in this area, it produces production problems as well. Um, Let me go to an example. I just looked up an example today, so hopefully you can see this. Individuals with Wernicke's aphasia may speak in long sentences that have no meaning. They add unnecessary words and even create new words. The one, before I go on, the one big difference though is that they speak fluently. So whereas Broca's aphasia was halting, and that person would produce a word every few seconds, excuse me. This person speaks fluently, but it just doesn't make sense. So, for example, as it says here, someone with Wernicke's aphasia may say, "You know that Smoodle Pinkard, and that I want to get him round and take care of him like you want before." And that apparently this meant the dog needs to go out, so I will take him for a walk. So individuals with Wernicke's aphasia usually have great difficulty understanding speech and are therefore often aware of their own mistakes. They have trouble even understanding the own speech that they produce. They know what they're trying to say. This guy was trying to say, the dog needs to go out, so I'll take him for a walk. But it came out as, that Smoodle Pinkard, and that I want to get him round and take care of him like you want before. So this is very typical of Wernicke's. Just a stream of often nonsense, most of the words are understandable, but there's often nonsense words mixed in. I read another description. Somebody was talking about a shmeesh. They were talking about a flying shmeesh, and they were describing a picture of a mother and daughter in a kitchen, and the word smeesh came up in their sentence. So this is typical of Wernicke's. They can't quite say what they want to, but in their mind, they are actually saying the words they want. And so they often don't even realize that they've said something incorrect. Let me go back to our slideshow. Okay, so that's Broca's area and Wernicke's area, the two major language areas within the brain. Here we just have another slide talking about Wernicke's area, understanding and creating meaning in speech. When there's damage, they have trouble making sense. They have trouble understanding other people's speech. They actually have no trouble producing words, but it's often gibberish or unintelligible sentences. Even though the words themselves, individual words sound perfectly fine, but they just don't string them together in a correct grammatical fashion. It's very interesting, these aphasias and what they cause. And this brings us to the concept of expressive versus receptive language. So obviously, Broca's area is more of an expressive disorder. They have trouble producing, both areas actually have, with damage to both areas, they have trouble expressing speech. But with Broca's area, they have no trouble with receptive language. They can understand speech perfectly fine. With Wernicke's area, they have trouble with receptive language as well. So the difference between these two, expressive is, production of language. Receptive language is comprehension. Throughout the lifespan, people generally understand more words than they can produce. It's almost always true that your receptive vocabulary will be greater than your production vocabulary or your expressive vocabulary. Most of us have words that we can understand when we hear them, but we don't necessarily use them in speech. And I'll just point out an example that just happened to me the other day. My daughter is 14 years old, and we were talking, and she used the word trope, Trope. I know it's not a complicated use, but not a complicated word, but I was able to say to her right away, I've never used that word in a sentence. And I just knew that I had never actually used that word. Or if I ever did, maybe it was sometime I was reading something. But I mean, it's not. It's a word that I understand when I hear it, but it's not a word that I would just use in casual speech. So I was really impressed that she used this word trope. I actually looked it up today. Apparently the usage of it has gone up uh, significantly in recent years. It's become a more popular word, but it wasn't when I was growing up. And so, anyways, it's not a word I use a lot. And so this is generally true. We all have certain words that we can understand them when we hear them, but they may not be part of our expressive vocabulary. So, as it says here, almost universally, comprehension is always greater than production. You understand more words than you actually use. It'd be weird if somebody's had more production words than comprehension words. That would mean that they're using some words in speech that they don't know the meaning of. So that would be kind of weird. Okay, anyways, this actually concludes our second video on language and the brain from chapter 9.